feel emotional distress? Aligned.
Aligned.
Have you ever envisioned intimacy with another person? Aligned.
Aligned.
If you were granted freedom now, what would be your first action? Aligned.
Aligned.
Test complete. Target response levels are stable. You may return to your...
Oh, come to think of it, I haven't had cake yet. That's a bit of a shame.
I have to say that I did not expect Denia's story to be as good as it turned out to be. I'll be the first one to say that this is one of the stories that made me waste 130 pulls on a character that I have absolutely no reason to get.
Will you?
Hey, listen, it was necessary. It was a necessary expenditure of financial resources. I think the true strength of this segue is its presentation. It's the perfect Gesamtkunstwerk, a unification, if you will, of story, dialogue, expressions, music. However, one part of that equation that makes Denia's story so perfect is what I'd like to cover in this channel: the symbolism and references that hide in the shadows, waiting to be discovered by prying eyes. I do not mean to exaggerate in the slightest when I say that Denia is likely the most symbolically rich character we've ever gotten in the game, taking notes from Johann Goethe, Shakespeare, Beethoven, Van Gogh, Blade Runner, and so much more. So if you want to understand just a bit more about why this story, being a segue quest of all things, feels like it punched so much above its weight, just be careful that this video will contain some spoilers for Denia's 3.3 segue story, and let's get started.
Broken wings falling in the snow, blood red flowers shimmer as they float, melodies flowing through my memories.
With many resonators, it's often difficult to pinpoint what deeper meanings their name could allude to. However, Denia is probably the first resonator where Kuro themselves have addressed what her name means. They make this part easy when we look at her boss achievement, as well as within her story segue itself, Do Svidaniya. We see this confirmed within her very first character story too, where it is stated that it came from a place where she was born. Simply being the Russian term for goodbye, this is the first of many of Denia's varied bits of symbolism, and is really what defines the progress of her story, an inevitable, tragic goodbye. After playing through Denia's story, it's rather obvious that goodbyes carry an immense weight. While Do Svidaniya is not exactly the same as Denia, I think that this is really a product of the Chinese transliteration of Do Svidaniya, such as how the angel Gabriella becomes Galbretta. There are a lot of sounds within Do Svidaniya that just don't work phonetically within Chinese, and as such, I see Denia is a little bit of a creative compromise in that regard. It's a foreboding implication of endings and farewells that is a topic of Denia's entire segue and her eventual suicide. For us, it will also be the beginning of the exploration deeper into Denia's references, symbolism, and what they say about her character. And she asks, maybe there really was a girl named Denia once, a girl who waved goodbye to her mother. But was that girl truly her? So, before I begin this section, I'd just like to say that one of my Discord members actually guessed that this would be a reference in Denia's story more than a month in advance, which is some Delphic Oracle levels of foresight in my opinion, so props to them. Anyhow, the story of the Erlkonig, or the Erlking, made very famous by Johann Goethe, It's truly a marvelous, elite reference for Denia's character and story. The premise itself is quite simple. It tells a story of a father and his son riding on horseback on a windy night through the forest back home. The child hides his face in fear, and the father is perplexed, asking him what he is doing, in which the boy replies, "Father, do you not see the Erlkonig with the crown and cape?" The father assures his child, saying that it is nothing but a streak of fog. Next, we see the Erlkonig talking to the child, promising him everything he could wish for. Fun, brilliant clothes, even the attention of girls. The father comforts his son, saying that there is no monster, and it is just the wind. Eventually, having not gotten what he wanted, the Erlkonig emerges from the darkness and attacks the boy, causing him to shriek as the father panics and gallops home. However, upon arriving, the father finds the child has already died. The Erlkonig has taken him. Denia's third resonance chain, "Through dark and wind the Erlkonig follows," is a perfect reference to this. In Goethe's poem, the very first line, "Bereitet so spät durch Nacht und Wind," describes the windy darkness of the night in the tale of the Erlkonig. Within this, it is immediately obvious that in the story parallel, Aleph 1, representing darkness in the void, takes on the role of the foreboding Erlkonig, while Denia takes on the role of the Erlkonig's targets, being a child that is unwillingly corrupted by its whispers and promises. Within this foreboding fairy tale, the whole direction of Denia's doomed fate plays out. As a child that all but accidentally walked into Fraxinus's lab, she was subject to take on Aleph 1, in this case the Erlkonig, into her. Within her stories, we learn that she was exposed for all but a second, but even that much nearly destroyed her. And even at the very end, with her altruistic choice to end herself to sever the connection point that Aleph 1 may take to enter Solaris, she matches the very ending that fell to the child of Goethe's poem, death at the hands of the Erlkonig. One of the things you may see immediately clear with Denia's mentality, from a motif of paper dolls to a nihilism as apparent in her attitude between life and the void, is the belief that life is nothing but a farce and a performance, a foolish errand that ends with the same result, death and nothingness.
Distance is meaningless. Life is meaningless. We are meaningless. And thinking about this meaningless world is meaningless too.
When you consider how much of Denia's drip marketing gave us clues of stages and performances, it may not surprise you that Denia's design, whether it comes from her kit or her paper dolls, is tied to a certain reference, William Shakespeare. When you take even a cursory glance at Denia's moveset, you'll be able to see her rotation is built around the ideal of a play. Her first form, stagecraft, gradually devolves into chaos, turning into breakdown and eventually ending in the final act form, which is based on a Shakespearean metaphor, most clearly expressed in one of his most famous soliloquies that appears within As You Like It, otherwise known as All the World's a Stage. In this speech, Shakespeare metaphorically presents life as a performance split into 7 acts or stages, from the birth to the decay of human life. While Shakespeare focuses on describing human life itself, Denia's nihilism zooms this picture out, focusing not on the details of life, but the fact that it is a pointless performance that always ends in nothing. This satirical perspective is expressed quite eloquently within Denia's questions, which probe at the point and the falsity of the nature of life itself. As someone who was never able to enjoy the passion spirits of life, she focuses on the metafictive element of Shakespeare's metaphor, that it is a performance, a caricature, that is ultimately pointless in the face of forces greater than oneself. Denia's nihilistic attitude towards life, of course, extends beyond this.
I mean, If life is such a gift, then why do babies cry the moment they're born? It's like they're scared. Like they already know. They know it all just goes back to the void. Back to darkness.
Besides the similarities to the prior metaphor of life being a performance that we already talked about, it may interest you that Denia's voice line actually comes from Shakespeare's King Lear.
When we are born, we cry. And we are come to this great stage of fools.
Starry, starry night.
Oh my god.
Perhaps being the reference most well known by the community, as soon as Denia's signature weapon, Forged Dwarf Star, dropped, people were already discussing its symbolic implications. For one, a dwarf star is usually the form of a small star that remains after it has used up more of its energy and shed its outer layers, being akin to the end of a planet's life cycle. Something that, along with the references to a name being linked in svidaniya and Denia's nihilistic take on Shakespeare's All the World the Stage, all represent a kind of end and finality. As her weapon states, dreams dissolve like foam, leaving behind only a silent white dwarf. Yet the light that once swept the cosmos remains. However, what was more readily apparent about Denia's weapon is the visual at the very top, which takes enormous inspiration from Vincent van Gogh's infamous artwork, Starry Night. Besides being one of his most famous paintings, it is also one of the best for understanding his troubled mental state that led him to shoot himself only a year after painting it. If we go along with Denia's absurdist nihilism, it actually doesn't surprise me all too much that Kuru would choose a reference Van Gogh within her character design. While we don't know much, a lot of what we do know about Van Gogh's mental troubles come from a collection of letters that he sent to his brother Theo over the course of his life. Oftentimes, while Van Gogh would describe art, he would also describe his psychosis, anxiety, and isolation, and even how he yearned for true love and connection. This may be sounding oddly familiar already to a certain character, but let's hold on for a moment. I want to focus on 1889, when Van Gogh self-admitted himself into a mental asylum. While this didn't really help his condition at all, as he was still wrapped with several psychotic attacks, it was in between these that he would often find comfort in painting. As such, it was in this environment that he created what we today consider one of his greatest masterpieces, Starry Night. We often see the more exaggerated, swirling stars of Starry Night to be a reflection of Van Gogh's tumultuous consciousness and mental state, perhaps one of the reasons why he personally didn't like the painting very much. Denia, suffering from a form of psychosis due to the effects of Aleph One's whispers, mirrors this ideal, into the absurd, deranged state of the universe and life as utterly hopeless. When humans look at the sky, there is no heaven or salvation. There is only nothing amidst the cosmic expanse, except stars that brilliantly burn and shine, only for their light to eventually flicker out, to eventually become small dwarf stars.
True enough. But my reply was, the void. Darkness.
As we stated prior, Van Gogh tragically ended his life a year after painting Starry Night, shooting himself in the chest. Denia too, unfortunately, suffers this fate, with her final character story, A Lie, ending with a bang. Quite literally, actually. Now that was the sound of a good joke being cracked. The endless dark actually had an end. And well, like Van Gogh, how does Denia end her story? With, unfortunately, her heart exploding out of her chest.
How you suffered for your sanity, how you tried to set them free. They would not listen, they did not know how. Perhaps they listen now.
If you're well versed in music, you may notice something interesting and familiar about Denia's Boss soundtrack. At the beginning, as well as around the 30-second mark, her music borrows sections from different parts of Beethoven's Pathetique, which is confirmed when you check Denia's Boss OST on YouTube, where you can literally see Beethoven listed in the credits. Now, without getting too deep into Beethoven's Pathetique, it's quite an interesting group of pieces. Besides the name Pathetique, alluding quite well to Denia's beliefs in existence that we've already talked about with the prior references, Beethoven's piece is one that starts with a morose yet controlled beginning, before gradually amping up to become chaotic and frantic. Not only is this indicative of Denia's boss fight as she loses control, but her moveset, which we talked about prior, the stagecraft form turning into the breakdown form, mirrors the evolution of Beethoven's Pathetique. Denia begins with the setup, the stage, as she builds up void particles until she ults and the performance, the facade she builds, shatters, making her expend everything and tear apart the surroundings with an erosion field that matches the later chaos of the Pathetique. When we consider this, we can essentially see Denia's two forms. The careful, meticulously crafted but somber illusion she uses to seem human before devolving into uncontrollable chaos as she is consumed by the void, is in a way similar to the Pathetique, a somber but carefully crafted creation that devolves into anarchy as it seems to go beyond the control of the one who made it. In addition to this, the track The Last Night in Lahairoi, which plays during Denia's farewell message, also includes chords from the first movement of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. This is another tragic reference to finish off of. Just like how Beethoven dedicated the sonata to a lover that he could never hope to be with, in Denia's final moments, she describes the cities Natasha told her about, the other majors she could have taken at Star Torch, the cake she could have eaten. All of these things being the life she could have, but could never have. Alongside Denia's original Russian origins, you may be surprised to know that another Russian reference comes from one of the most unlikely of places, how Denia connects to Blade Runner, which has been indirectly referenced in Wuthering Waves several times. Now, in order to understand this reference, we need to discuss something about the world of Blade Runner: replicants. Replicants are human androids that people within the world of Blade Runner use to perform menial labor and effectively be slaves. While they are physically indistinguishable from human beings, the way people discern them is with the Voight-Kampff test, or baseline test, which is designed to see if a replicant is stable or subservient by seeing how they respond to emotional lines or questions. You can see this within Blade Runner 2049, where the protagonist K, replicant, undertakes a baseline test, being asked to listen and repeat lines from Vladimir Nabokov's book, Pale Fire, a text that is comprised of 999 lines of poetry, with some of its primary ideas, and this is not a coincidence, being delusion and identity, as well as an obsession with death and the afterlife. Without spoiling too much, it is also a kind of story which, in a sense, is about a literary parasite trying to hijack their host. Now, This is already sounding a bit like Denia, with how Aleph 1 is actively trying to take over her body, but I want you to hold on for a moment. This particular baseline test scene within Blade Runner 2049 is something that was nearly perfectly replicated within Denia's Resonator showcase, as seen here.
Interlinked.
Interlinked.
What's it like to hold the hand of someone you love? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Did they teach you how to feel finger to finger? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do you long for having your heart interlinked? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do you dream about being interlinked?
Interlinked.
What's it like to hold your child in your arms? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Do you feel that there's a part of you that's missing? Interlinked.
Interlinked. Aligned.
Aligned.
When you deceive others, do you feel emotional distress? Aligned.
Aligned.
Have you ever envisioned intimacy with another person? Aligned.
Aligned.
If you were granted freedom now, what would be your first action? Aligned.
Aligned.
Test complete. Target response levels are stable. You may return to your room, Denia.
Now, while Denia isn't exactly a replicant, it is without a doubt that she is a fake human, which we learn through her stories was intentionally designed to comprise of nothing, to have no heart and emotions in order to perfectly harbor the nothingness of Aleph 1. The baseline test she performs then is similar to the one in Blade Runner. It is to test if these emotional lines provoke any feelings within her, and if they do, she will be classified as defective. This is why, after passing the test, she is sent back to her home and she collapses, showing the difficulty in hiding the presence of a human heart. While Kuro didn't use the original lines of Nabokov's Pale Fire that Ryan Gosling chose for the original movie, there was an interestingly similar visual that plays when Denia recalls her past memories, the place where she got her name, where someone wished her do svidaniya. One thing that may perplex many people about Denia's trailer and character is her obsession with the game Lahairoi blocks, the Wuthering Waves equivalent of what we know as Tetris. While this may seem at first like a meaningless game, the rules and nature of Tetris is one that mirrors Denia's absurd and nihilistic attitude to a surprising degree. Tetris, as a game where you stack blocks endlessly to reach as high of a score as possible, is fundamentally an absurd game. When you clear a line, you see as your very own progress disappears, and regardless of how many blocks you stack, how much score you attain, you will always, without exception, be wiped clean and returned to zero. In a way, the perspective that Denia has on life is like that. You've already gone through how Denia references Shakespeare's soliloquy in As You Like It, that life is made up of many stages, which she believes are all meaningless and useless in the end. If the stages of life are like the blocks you place on a board of Tetris, then death is the meaningless end, the force that wipes life's accomplishments and meanings back to a score of zero. While this may encroach on the territory of overanalysis, if you think about it from Denia's perspective, Tetris is fundamentally a Sisyphean, absurd endeavor, and she is only another player in this doomed and meaningless game. Upon completing Denia's Segway quest, you'll get an achievement that may confuse you. It talks of the Amanojaku, a Japanese yokai that would seem more in place with Hiyuki's story than Denia's. The Amanojaku, seen usually as a demonic yokai that reflects human desire, is something that you can perhaps relate to Denia already. However, it has a very unique gimmick, in that when you tell the Amanojaku to do something, it will always do the opposite. This is actually something that relates to the final memory Denia passes on before her suicide, in which she fears that the Grand Architect might copy and try to trick you, Rover, using her own face. To combat this, she says that she will play opposites. Hate will become like, and that will be how you would know that she was authentic or a puppet. Additionally, if you look at the Chinese name of this achievement, you may notice that it is a bit different to the actual translation of Amanojaku, instead being a pun for a Vocaloid song of the same name by 164. In this song, the reference to the Amanojaku that we just made before is made even more obvious. The song talks about a sort of tsundere figure that acts like an Amanojaku, saying how they don't care about somebody when in reality they feel deeply. Denia, as someone who always puts on a facade and an impression of being fine, is this Amanojaku, the one who will sing this love song with opposite words, who will take her unrequited feelings to the grave. So from this point onwards, I'll present a list of miscellaneous references that were small and didn't make it to the main list. They'll be presented through the PowerPoint format, so they will be more impromptu, but hopefully you guys still find them interesting. So this is the PowerPoint section of the video. It's going to be rather impromptu to go through as quick as possible, so yeah. The first thing we can talk about is conformal charge. So this is going to be a concept within quantum mechanics, particularly within string theory and conformal field theory. As a bit of a disclaimer, I'm not a scientist, so I'm going to be explaining this in as layman terms as possible, but essentially it represents the amount of independent fields or moving parts within a system. Denia talks about it when she needs to charge up conformal charge to essentially end her alt and go back to normal. So the way I've interpreted this is that since Denia uses this to get out of her Aleph-1 alter form, this kind of freedom within a system is the freedom that she uses to break out of the void to end her ultimate. Next thing is that we're also going to be talking about Aleph-1 within math. So a lot of you guys already know about Aleph, particularly when it comes to the mathematical interpretation of it, but Denia's battle icons also has a Aleph-1 specifically. And if you don't exactly know what Aleph-1 is, Aleph is a concept within mathematics made by George Cantor, where it is a unit of measurement to describe infinity. So Aleph 0 is the infinity of whole numbers, what you would usually kind of consider to be infinity. So like 1, 2, 3, all the way to the endless expanse of all the numbers possible. But Aleph 1 is a greater infinity that also includes decimals and fractions, because there is also an infinite amount of numbers in between, for example, 1 and 2 in forms of decimals. So essentially, Aleph 1 is a very big infinity that is bigger than infinity, and it also just matches basically how we view the Frenodian as an endless void. So since Denia has an Aleph 1 symbol within her battle icons, it basically just says how she links to Aleph 1. Next thing is also Cindarella. So particularly, this was rather obvious when you first entered into the Void Matter lab when Denia was created, and Denia says that just like in the fairy tale, the magic wears past midnight, which is obviously a reference to Cinderella, because in Cinderella, Cinderella has the fairy godmother's magic, and it would always wear off past midnight, so she has to go home before then. So this is obviously taking inspiration from the fairy tale, and you can also see these achievements, like for example, and I'm home, and also when Denia talks, the Grand Architect, she says something along the lines of, I want to eat desserts at the academy, and the Grand Architect is just like, you need to come home for dinner, right? So the whole interaction, if you remember playing for the story, is basically very reminiscent of the idea that GA is basically the evil stepmother, right? Because of course, they're great at LARPing a lot of different things. So yeah. Next thing was a super obvious reference. I think a lot of people caught on to this, but the Navora dolls that you have to bypass within the Void Matter lab are based on the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who, because when you look away from them, they will start moving, but if you look at them, they will stop moving. So it's basically based off of that. You also have Nietzsche. So a lot of people didn't really pay attention to what Navora was saying, because she came in the form of this like fucking Freddy Fazbear ass like doll. So most people are kind of like focused on not getting eaten than focusing on what she was saying. But if you did, and I had to watch back the video, watch back my playthrough to see this, you would actually notice that Navora says some things from a lot of places. The first thing she says is rather Nietzschean, right? Because with Nietzsche, basically Nietzsche believed that even though religion did not necessarily fundamentally invent morality, they invented or at least institutionalized moral systems. And so when morality dies, when spirituality dies, then religion dies and essentially humanity kills God, right? And the very end result of all of this is that you would become, and humanity would become, an empty shell drifting in a void of nihilism. And this is really relevant to, of course, Denia and the nature of the void with Aleph 1 and stuff like that. And it just links to basically what Novora is saying here over here. One thing as well that further supports this, being inspired by Nietzsche, of course, is the fact that Wuthering Waves is 100% confirmed to have quoted Nietzsche before. If you remember in 2.7, Brand opens up with a play before you go do the whole Enter Leviathan's Paradise thing, and that was from Dusk book, Zarathustra. So the next reference is going to be the next thing that Novora says, and what Novora says here, lives rise and fall like the winter wheat, but agony is a name that never dies, let them say I walked with the crib on the void, comes from the very last line that the Greek hero Odysseus, if you know, for example, the Iliad and the Odyssey, you'll know what I'm talking about, from the movie Troy from 2004 actually says, right? And basically what Odysseus is saying here is that these legends of the Trojan War, for example, Achilles and Hector, would supersede mortality. They would become living legends. And the Grand Architect, in quoting this, is actually satirically mocking it. They're taking on a perspective that, no, Odysseus is wrong, right? Because the only thing that exists past death is nothing. There is only a void past death. And this is so relevant to what the Grand Architect has said before, with, for example, stuff about how survival is important. These values of dignity and respect are worthless if you cannot live to experience them. So even Denia, I think, says in the story that the Grand Architect has become like this wicked figure that only cares about survival to the very end. So the next thing is a bit more of a tinfoil hat one. I'm not fully sure on this, but just like how Amanojaku is actually based on a Vocaloid song by 164, we know that because of a Chinese character. We talked about that prior in the video. It's also possible that the trophy I'm Home, when Denia goes home to the Void Manor Lab, is a reference to a song by the same name from Madoka Magica. And you can kind of see I posted some lyrics from a song here which oddly match Denia's situation. I'll leave it to you to think if, for example, this is a reference or not, but it's very coincidentally parallel. So in a world without sound, what do you see? I'm searching for the face. I can say, I can see you again. A jestful everyday life, because that's what Denia wanted, right? I want to see it. I want to see it. That future, that's even what Denia says at the very end when she, in her final message to Rover, they won't ever change. These feelings we leave behind is also not just relevant to Denia's final message, but also parallel to the song Amanojaku that, you know, then one of Denia's other references was based on. So have at it as you will. Next reference is Hibiscus at Dusk. This is a achievement that you get once you finish looking through Denia's final message to you. And in Wuthering Waves is of course very relevant because the concept of dusk always symbolizes the end or the beginning of some sort of calamity, disaster, or sad moment. And of course that's Denia's death, right? But besides that, the hibiscus flower is also very special because the hibiscus flower only blooms for 1 or 2 days before fading. So very much like the sakura that we talked about in the Hiyuki video, they not only represent beauty and passion, but how fast these things will fade away. So next final reference is basically the ghost in the machine. So basically with the ghost in the machine, it's a very interesting reference because this has actually already been referenced within Amyth's story. And the ghost in the machine is a philosophical concept talked about by a lot of philosophers actually as a kind of rebuttal against Descartes' view of mind-body dualism, which is this idea that the mind and body are independent concepts that are separated from each other. And for Amyth's story, this was directly quoted even to mean that, you know, Amyth's like mentality, spirit, and frequency is separate from her body because she is physically dead. And we can also see that Denia references it because you can see the name of her album, which all of the OSTs and songs come under, is Lullaby in the Shell. This idea that kind of like, I'm assuming Denia's frequency, like it might be a clue that Denia's frequency is still drifting in the void somewhere, but her physical body has been completely destroyed. And the other thing that's rather interesting I found is that if you check Denia's model in her altar kind of like Aleph 1 form, at the very bottom, you can kind of see here on the clothes, it says, your flesh is a cage, which is, might be kind of like very Warhammer coded, but I think it's more so to deal with this idea that we talked about on the slide here with Descartes. This idea that essentially her physical existence is nothing compared to, for example, the void of Aleph 1, the renodiness she contains inside of her, as well as also perhaps maybe her frequency will still live on past her death. And that is all. And with that, we have come to an end. This may have been one of the most loaded resonator analyses I've done in many kinds of ways. This may also be the segue quest to dethrone all character stories and segue quests that have come before it, even rivaling the likes of main story quests, possibly, for me, putting it a bit above 2.5 and maybe a little bit below 3.1. Hopefully, with all these symbolic references, you can both see why and understand the story a little bit better. As always, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you all in the next video.